Don't F with the Lords of Hell. Don't F with Movie Emporium Reviews. Hey guys, welcome to a Movie Emporium Flashback Reviews, where I of course take films from the past, take a look at them, and tell you what I think about them. So here we are. We are in the 4th of July weekend. I usually don't do reviews or any of that sorts on like a Saturday because I kind of want to have a rest day or whatever, but I have to talk about this film. It's a film that came out on the holiday weekend of July 4th. It came out July 2nd, 1987, and this is a good weekend, to be fairly honest. I was actually surprised that this film not only came out in 1987, but it actually came out the same weekend as one of my favorite films of all time, which of course is Joe Dante's Inner Space, of course produced by Spielberg. And that film I love. I did do a review for it, so I'll put it up in that little description thing at the top. But this is a film, Adventures in Babysitting is what we're talking about. Once again, July 2nd, 1987, its release date. And believe it or not, is Chris Columbus, who is known for like Harry Potter and Rent, and of course the Christmas Chronicle series that is on Netflix. His first movie as a director. It's not his first movie as a writer, because of course he wrote Goonies and Gremlins. But because of how he was in the 1980s as an up-and-coming creator, this fits actually right into his repertoire, because if you know anything about Gremlins, you know that was supposed to be an R-rated film, of course. Goonies is especially dark for a kid's film, but I love it. So it's safe to say that Chris Columbus was directing and writing films that I actually truly adore. And that's kind of crazy to think about, but when I went and actually noticed that this film came out 35 years ago as of this release of this review, I kind of had to talk about it, because like One Crazy Summer or Goonies or any of these films, Adventures in Babysitting was a film that I watched incessantly. It was up there with like Flight of the Navigator, where it's not meant for kids. It's very dark and disturbing, and it kind of has a special charm to it that just is the 80s in a nutshell, and just the kind of stuff that Chris Columbus was willing to put on the screen, and somehow kids loved it. And it's the same thing with Inner Space. It is definitely not a kid's film, but it was a different time for us individuals who are getting close to our 40s and 50s. The 80s were Cloak and Dagger, that type of thing. They were just a different era for kids films and films that kids watched. We did have our G.I. Joe the movie and Transformers the movie and stuff like that, E.T. But Adventures in Babysitting is a film that I hold dear, because it's like a fantasy film in a lot of aspects. It's about a group of kids who have to go rescue the friend of course, Elisabeth Shue's character, who of course is played by Penelope Ann Miller. The kind of how they travel, the kind of shenanigans they get into, the fact that they find themselves in the middle of a chop shop with a bunch of dangerous individuals. The intrigue, the idea that their car is shot, and they have to go and pay Dawson's Garage $50 and stuff like that because of the whole situation. But it's a film that, I just kind of fell in love with as I was growing up. It was a film that I had, of course, recorded on a videotape, as we always did, and, back in the day. It's a film that I watched, like I said, with, like, Flight of Navigator and Cloak and Dagger and, of course, like, E.T. and stuff like that. It's a film that just kind of, maybe for not a lot of people, but for me personally, holds a special place in my heart. And on top of everything, when it was released on Disney Plus, they got rid of like the best moment in the movie, which is of course when the group of individuals, the group of kids, find themselves on a Chicago train, and we have a gang fight that happens. And of course, there's that famous moment that I said in the beginning where basically Chris, who is of course Elisabeth Shue character, is kind of in the middle of everything, and Keith Coogan's Brad character intervenes, and I swear to God, Elisabeth Shue became like one of my favorite actresses after this moment, because they go, don't mess with, or don't F with the Lords of Hell. And of course she says, don't F with the babysitter, which Disney Plus completely just chopped it out of the episode or out of the movie. They kind of changed it. They did the whole TV reworking thing. And without a moment like that, or without the moment in the chop shop or on top of the roof of that big building that of course is, in Chicago, it kind of takes away the mystique and the awesomeness that is this movie, because it is about a group of, suburban kids who find themselves in the middle of the Chicago city at night, dealing with some really dangerous and dark stuff. And that moment is like a great moment of levity, a great moment of fun and entertainment. And that is what this movie does. Is why I love this movie. It is a very 80s movie, like the bus stop where Penelope Ann Miller's character spends most of the movie, Brenda, and the dealing with like the hot dogs and the rats and the homeless people. It's a movie definitely not very PC for its nature, but the characters, even the side characters, are a lot of fun and stuff like that. And the story, if you've never seen Adventures in Babysitting, the basic story is we have have a young woman named, of course, Chris, who is played by Elisabeth Shue. She ends up watching a group of kids, of course, Keith Coogan, who plays Brad, and Maia Brewton, who of course plays Sarah. And once again, they are very, what I would call like more like above middle class individuals who, are watched because the parents are going to a party. And in the process of everything, there's an incident that happens at the beginning of the movie where, of course, Brenda's character says she's going to leave home. She threatens to, spike her mother's drink with Drano or something like that. It's really dark. And then she ends up leaving home and finds herself in the bus station, which she finds out is a very bad situation. She somehow convinces Chris to go get her. And of course, Sarah and Brad find themselves or force themselves onto this journey. And then we have Anthony Rapp's horn dog character, Daryl, who, of course, if you know Anthony Rapp, he, of course, was in Rent as one of the major characters. And basically, they travel to Chicago to pick up Brenda, but they get a flat tire. They meet a guy named John Pruitt, who ends up, taking on his wife's wife's cheating lover or whatever. The car gets shot. They end up getting picked up by this car thief, or this car thief steals the car, who is named Joe Gibb. They find themselves in a chop shop where a couple of dangerous individuals basically are going to do some unscrupulous things, like kill them after they get done with their meeting. These individuals steal a Playboy, which apparently has a likeness of Chris's individual, Elisabeth Shue's character. So she keeps getting confused in the Playboy. And then they go on an escapade where they're trying to evade these individuals, and they find themselves, of course, eventually at the end where they find themselves in the tower where the family or the parents are at. And there's like the really cool moment where Sarah is like on top of the tower, whatever it is, like angled, and she's like, could fall into her death and stuff like that. And it has like a really cool payoff to its eventual conclusion where all this kind of insanity, like a Looney Tunes type of scenario, eventually works itself out, and so on and so forth. So that's the basic storyline in a nutshell. And there are pieces and parts in there to begin with, but when you think about that premise and that storyline, it's been done before, especially 35 years later. It's been done many times. But I think because this story and the fact that it's willing to go adult, and yes, kids are watching it, and it kind of holds no bars with what it's doing, I think that's why it makes it special. It's not what I would call the greatest movie ever made, because a lot of people do not like this movie, but I think the characters are fun. They're very relatable. We, as teenagers, as we know, were very sexually aware. We were, horn doggish, I guess you could say. We looked at Playboys, or, if you're in today's society, you're looking at porn, I guess you could say. We got in escapades, not to like this degree, and sometimes things work out, sometimes they didn't, but I think that's why this movie works in the nutshell that it does, because those escapades feel really, not what I would say 100% realistic, but they feel, like a good adventure. It's like The Goonies, Chris Columbus's other screenplay that he wrote. There's an adventure to it, and even though it's a dark, story, we have the Fratellis chasing after the young kids. Here we have the mobster bosses chasing after the young kids. It has like an awe and like a mystique to it that is really fun. And like I said, these characters are over the top and silly, and they're very what I call not very dimensional in a lot of aspects, but they have enough charisma that they kind of make the story flow. And once again, we have Elisabeth Shue, Keith Coogan, of course, Maia Brewton, we have Anthony Rapp, and then on top of everything, once again, Penelope and Miller. And then we get into like the supporting cast, and that's where we have George Newbern, who plays kind of the love interest coming in later on in the movie. We, of course, have Bradley Whitford, who plays like the very slimy boyfriend, as we learn later on, which has a great moment in a restaurant where of course, Chris finds out she's been betrayed and kind of cheated on. And then we have what I would call a very Marvel-esque style cool moment at the end, near the end of this movie, where the car that gets shot and the window replaced, and of course the tire needs replaced, is taken to a place called Dawson's Garage. The character of Sarah is a huge Thor fan. She has been, this whole movie. She wears the helmet, the old Thor helmet. She has the colors of Thor on her like jacket and stuff like that. She is just absolutely enthralled with Thor. We have Keith Coogan and of course Anthony Rapp, just really intrigued by the porn situation with the magazine. And of course Chris is being mistaken for this Playboy actress and stuff like that. But it comes into the mix of when they go to Dawson's Garage that the guy playing Dawson, the one who owns the garage, is of course played by Vincent D'Onofrio, who, if you think about it, in the 80s, could have been a Thor, and he could have played Thor because of his body type, how much he had, how much charisma he has. He feels like a very early 80s, Chris Hemsworth in a lot of ways, a very good looking individual. And there's a scene in this movie where they go and they need $50 and they take the $45 or whatever to the garage. And Sarah, who's a huge Thor fan, convinces Dawson to, allow them to get take the car for $45. But just the idea that it has this Thor payoff and it's like a really cool early Marvel kind of situation, and how Sarah is able to convince Dawson, the Vincent D'Onofrio character, that is a really cool, fun thing, and just has a really cool aesthetic to it because it's really dark and grungy and stuff like that, which is what Chicago can be like in a lot of the parts of the city. And watching them go to like underground garage where superhero could lie and stuff like that, it just, that kind of stuff is a lot of fun. And on top of that, moving past like the Dawson's garage stuff, there, like I said, there's the train sequence. There's a sequence where they're at the blues club where they start singing. There's like this really incredible song that's like kind of done on the fly and stuff like that. So they have the blues player, and Chris gets up there and starts singing, and that is a lot of fun. And like I said, the whole idea with Pruitt and like the story he tells and stuff like that, that's what makes this movie kind of special, is those moments, though they are dark and disturbing in a lot of aspects. Like I said, like when the kids are on the rafters and Joe Gibb is like this heartfelt character who actually helps the kids in a lot of ways, which I question how much he's going to live after this movie concludes, because not only does he let the kids get away and he sees them getting away, but at the end of the movie when they're on the roof of this building and one of the main bad guys goes on the roof and they rescue Sarah, but they leave the bad guy on the roof and Joe looks down and stuff like that and lets the kids go. These gangster mobster people they're not gonna respond well to Joe Gibbs' character, but Joe Gibbs is a lot of fun, so you kind of you love his kind of turn in this movie, because he's a car thief. I guess he's always gonna be a car thief, but he does something kind of heroic, which I love. That this feels like a very superhero-esque film with a lot of these characters, where they feel very heroic, they feel very superhero in their aspects, and they do crazy and wild stuff that just feels very, what do they call, interesting and fun, I guess you could say. But with that said, it's a film that unfortunately didn't do very well in the theater. I think it made like $35 million or something like that. Interspace only made like $24 million or something like that. It was not a good weekend for the 4th of July, but we're talking about a time where, unlike now where Minions comes out or a Marvel movie comes out or a Will Smith movie comes out where it makes tons of money. I mean, back in that time, 4th of July was a big weekend because kids are out of school. But when you think about it, you have films like Interspace and, of course, like I said, Adventures in Babysitting come out on the 4th of July weekend. So I'm assuming the studio, which of course was Disney, Buena Vista, whatever you want to call it, had a lot of faith in this movie. They thought it was going to do well. And I guess for 1987, $35 million is probably about $70 or $80 million in today's market, maybe a little bit more. But it just feels like that this movie was what you would call like Real Genius or like Interspace or Cloak and Dagger and stuff like that. It didn't do well in the theater, but it did well on videotape. So I would actually consider this movie a cult classic, because it's a movie not only is the first time directorial effort from, of course, Chris Columbus, but is a movie that you really kind of have to be a little older to watch, to be fairly honest, to get the jokes, to get the ideas, to get the concepts that this is a movie with a lot of adult themes and adult natured stuff. Like I said, when you're a kid and you're watching this movie and you're watching these young kids go on an adventure, you're watching them, rebel a little bit from the nature of the adulthood and stuff like that, but then you become an adult and you watch it. I love those types of films where they have different meanings depending on how old you are. So if you go back and watch this movie, I mean, kids today will probably go back and watch this movie and go, what the heck is this movie? When you're somebody like my age and you go back and you remember this movie, or you remember, like I said, Cloak and Dagger, or of course, Flight of the Navigator, you realize that these movies are special in a lot of aspects, and they're not what you would call like great filmmaking, but they are films that hold a special place in the filmmaking market. This helped really, allow Chris Columbus to become a director in a lot of aspects. It's not, once again, like, it's very subdued in its colors and lighting and stuff like that. It's very muddled and very grimy in a lot of aspects, but it was the 80s, so it kind of works. But I think because Chris Columbus had Gremlins and Goonies under his belt, I think that in the end that this film just kind of proved that he is a director that, even though some of his films aren't great, he does have a very talented thing behind his persona, which really shows on screen. And for this being his first film, and what it's doing in the cast that he got, and how he works with the cast, and how he works with the kids, I think it is just a film that just works on all levels. And once again, it's a film that I wouldn't recommend for an 8-year-old to watch. I wouldn't recommend for a 10-year-old to watch. But, if you're like 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, I think you would enjoy it. Yes, there are moments like Playboy and, the idea of like killing people and stuff like that, and just the dark nature of Chicago in the 80s. But it has a very fantastical feel to it. And that's what I truly love about it. So, with that said, that's kind of where I'm going to finish off this review for Adventures in Babysitting. What I want to know in the comments below is, 1, have you seen this movie? 2, do you love this movie? 3, do you not love this movie? And 4, tell me why or why you not like this film. What is it about this film that, holds a special place in your heart? Do you not like this film because of the themes that are going on? Just kind of, tell me in the comments what you think overall, because once again, this is a 35-year-old film. Happy birthday to, of course, Adventures in Babysitting, as well as Interspace. But once again, I have done a review for that film. But yeah, just kind of, let me know what you think of this film. Like, what is your overall thoughts? What is your favorite moment of this film? All that good stuff. But without further ado, that is going to be my official take on, of course, Adventures in Babysitting, the 35th anniversary. Yeah, I really love this film. I watch it once again every twice a year, and I wish Disney didn't neuter this film like they did on Disney Plus. So, but with that said, that is going to be my take on Adventures in Babysitting. Thank you so much for watching. As always, if you like these videos or reviews, hit that subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at the top to find what's coming next. If you like any of this content, of course, hit that like button, and we'll see you guys on the next Flashback review. Peace out, guys.